President Trump was told his name is in the Jeffrey Epstein files. He then said he wasn't told. And now a congressional subcommittee with Republican votes is going to subpoena those files. That's a lot to chew on. As sources tell CNN, the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche will meet today with longtime Jeffrey Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell, convicted of conspiring with Epstein to sexually abuse minors. Now, in May, Blanche and Attorney General Pam Bondi briefed the president on the findings of the Justice Department's review of the documents related to Epstein, which found that the files appeared to include several unsubstantiated claims that they determined not to be credible, including those relating to Trump. And just being named in the files does not indicate any wrongdoing. But the timing is notable. He was told his name was there weeks before the release of a DOJ memo that said there would be no more disclosures in the case. Overnight, a House subcommittee voted to subpoena from the Justice Department for the release of those files in full, and it was a bipartisan vote. As I said, a lot to chew on. So let's get to CNN's Evan Perez for the latest on, again, what is a really unusual meeting today with the Deputy Attorney General of the United States and a convicted felon.
That's right, John. This is really going to be a very unusual meeting, in part because, there's two burning questions. What does Ghislaine Maxwell know, and what can Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, really offer her to get her to talk, right? And so the big question here remains, Ghislaine Maxwell has a goal, which is to get out of prison. She has a 20-year sentence that she is serving. She has maintained her innocence, and so she really doesn't have much of an incentive to tell Todd Blanche anything unless she can get something in return. And as we pointed out, she wants to get out of prison. So we'll see how that meeting goes down in Tallahassee, which is where the Deputy Attorney General has headed today. And as you pointed out, look, the names that Ghislaine Maxwell knows about, the names of people who were associated with Jeffrey Epstein, is on everyone's mind, including the president. We were told that, our team was told at the White House that the president was briefed by Todd Blanche and by the Attorney General Pam Bondi that his name was in those files, which the FBI spent several weeks reviewing and redacting some of that information. And so that really does color some of the discussion on this. You pointed out correctly that the president's name occurring there, or the name of dozens of other people, doesn't mean that they did anything wrong. And so the question remains, how can we get those files? We also got an answer from one of the judges who's been reviewing these requests to review transcripts from grand jury testimony. Now, one of the things that happened there in Florida was a judge said you cannot release that under the Florida rules, under the rules in that circuit. However, there are two pending requests in New York for judges to release transcripts in those cases. John?
All right, Evan Perez for us following just part of this developing story. Thank you very much. Kate?
Important part of it today, for sure. Joining us right now is Nick Ackerman. He's a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York and former assistant special Watergate prosecutor. So, Nick, how unusual is this setup, this meeting between the Deputy Attorney General and Ghislaine Maxwell?
This is extremely unusual. You never have the number two person in the Department of Justice go and interview anybody. I mean, that is something that is done by line attorneys. What really is going on here, once you dig into this and you realize Todd Blanche was Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer. What they're doing and what's going on here is that they're hoping that Maxwell wants a pardon from Donald Trump. She knows that the only way she'll ever see the light of day and get out of that 20-year sentence is to get a pardon. And what they're hoping is that in order to do that, she will be motivated to say that Donald Trump didn't know what Jeffrey Epstein was up to with underage girls, and they never participated in that. The problem, of course, is there's no way you could ever believe Maxwell by virtue of the fact that she's got every motive to say whatever she wants in order to get that pardon. So the real question is, if she says that, are they still going to take that and then at some point later give her the pardon? I don't think there's going to be quite the same quid pro quo that you had with the Eric Adams case. Don't forget, Blanche's second in command, Beauvais, did basically the same thing with Eric Adams by dismissing his federal criminal case in the Southern District of New York, in return for him playing ball with the administration's immigration policies. So you see the same thing going on here. But if you kind of step back and say, well, what are they trying to do? They're hoping that if Maxwell thinks that she can get a pardon, that she'll say things that are favorable to Donald Trump. They'll use that. And who knows, maybe down the road, they'll actually pardon her. But all of this really stinks.
Interesting, your take on this. I mean, who knows what he's going to be going in there to I would say you have to offer in order to try to even see if she would be open to speaking and if they would accept it and what she would ask. We just don't know. But you also have this like series of subpoenas that are, well, you have the grand jury ask to the judge. The judge denies the grand jury transcripts to be released. You have these subpoenas coming from Capitol Hill saying, release all the documents, Justice Department, and then one on Ghislaine Maxwell. And you said that the DOJ's ask to get the grand jury transcripts released is nothing more than a distraction. And you're looking at what the Justice Department has and can release without a judge's approval, right?
That's right. I mean, first of all, the odds of getting a judge to approve this, I mean, it certainly was struck down in Florida because the law in the 11th Circuit, where that district court judge presides, is different, a little bit different than the Second Circuit, where there's a little bit more leeway. But both of those judges have asked for more information. But knowing what we know now, the fact that Donald Trump knew that his name was in those files, and knowing that he then tried to say, forget the whole matter, this whole thing should go away. Epstein has been dead for a couple of years. When we know all of that, it's so obvious to me that this whole business about trying to get the grand jury minutes is just kind of a distraction. They know, one, that there's not going to be anything in there. I've conducted hundreds of grand jury investigations as a former prosecutor. You don't put in the entire investigative file. You don't put in personal files of the possible defendants. In both of these cases, they were such that all you would really do is try and zero in, shape the testimony that relates to the charges that were brought by the grand jury. Not all of this other information, extraneous information. All of that is in the Department of Justice files. All of that is what should be produced.
Nick, it's great to see you. Thanks for the perspective on all of it. Really appreciate it. John.
All right, with us now is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a Democrat from Rhode Island who sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, thanks so much for being with us. It's a House committee that has subpoenaed Ghislaine Maxwell and wants to depose her, not on the Senate side, but I am curious, if you had a chance to speak with her, as I guess the Deputy Attorney General of the United States is today, what would you want to know from her?
Well, let me mention first just how very bizarre it is that the Deputy Attorney General of the United States is going out to do a witness interview. It really raises the question whether he's doing that in the role as Deputy Attorney General of the United States, or if he's stepping back into his role as Trump criminal defendant and having kind of a Tom Hagen moment with this particular witness. One really obvious question for Ghislaine Maxwell, the Wall Street Journal reporting about the birthday book for Jeffrey Epstein, to which Trump contributed a letter. The Wall Street Journal report on that is that Ghislaine Maxwell put that book together. If she put that book together, she knows about that Trump letter. She may have stories about how she obtained the Trump letter. Perhaps she went over to meet with him to get the Trump letter. Perhaps they joked about stuff as he filled in his name where the pubic hair of the drawn woman would be. All of that is a very immediate question for her, given the Wall Street Journal reporting. There's obviously tons more that she knows, but that's something that's very, very immediate. And if they're not asking about that while the president is denying that this letter even exists, then it clearly is more of a cover-up effort than an investigation effort.
And as you mentioned, the president, of course, does deny that he wrote that letter and is suing the Wall Street Journal over their reporting on that. The Senate Judiciary Committee.
She'll probably be a witness in that case.
The Senate Judiciary Committee, of which you are a member, Punchbowl is reporting that there are discussions on the Democratic side to try to have a vote at some point, maybe even today, on going after some of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Have you been able to convince any Republicans in that committee to vote for that?
The problem with Senate subpoenas, which we discovered, or which was demonstrated when we subpoenaed Leonard Leo about his mischief packing the Supreme Court, is that in order to enforce a subpoena in the Senate, you have to go to the floor and get a vote which is filibusterable, and you have to get floor time. And it's not the least bit clear that the Republican majority in the Senate would give us floor time and that we'd get 60 votes to break through a filibuster. So it's more important for the House to proceed because they don't operate under the shadow of a filibuster.